I'm looking for names up there on the big screen.
You don't have any members on the screen.
Not yet. I will have though, won't I?
I'm sorry.
I hope to have a couple members on the screen, yes, but they're not there yet. We're showing us remotely. And Steve. Before we officially convene the meeting, Administrator Langrick will entertain us with report items.
Okay, one of the reports that you're going to see in your packet and in the folder here when the meeting convenes, it'll be items number 12, the running report, and that kind of coincides then with the financial decision worksheet, item 11A. So I'm opening up item number 12 here, and I'll pull it up on the screen. Share it here. Again, the running report is to try to help us keep track of all the discussion points from the committee, the questions that are asked of staff, and then the actions that we're taking to make changes on the spreadsheet, and as well as on the capital plans. The main item of interest here today will be the changes to the worksheet. There were three main changes, and you'll see this on the summary as well. When we get to the item, we changed section 6, line 203.01 sales tax income to reflect $35,000 increase in 2023, up from 25,000. 35,000 up from 25,000. We also amended section 6, line 204.02 interest income from PMA to reflect a $68,000 increase in 2023, up from a $40,000 increase. And then in the same section, line 209.1 American Rescue, we pushed 38,000, then the total of the other two from 2023 to 2025. Let me pull open that document so we can kind of visualize where those changes happened. If you remember this very busy, confusing spreadsheet here, which is an effort to try to simplify the many actions that we're trying to take through the budget process, the forecasting, recommendations, etc. Section 6 is at the bottom. It kind of tries to encompass our different levers or options or different revenue sources that we can kind of visualize and track. The main changes that we discussed here today is on page 15 of 17. So you'll see in line 203.01. You folks see that in the room? Pretty small. I'll blow it up a little bit more. Yes, it is. In the packet, it's item number 11A. 11A. And I'm looking down on pages 15 of 17, lines 203.01, and then lines 24.02. So in talking with Treasurer Even, in reviewing our tax sales, last meeting we had is adjusted from $5,000 up to $25,000 for each year based on our best guess on trends again, it looks like we may be comfortable for the following year in moving that up to 35,000. But again, none of us being economists and knowing exactly what our local sales are going to equate to, we left the other ones currently at 25,000. Again, these numbers reflect then an increase over 2022. Unlike our net new construction and property tax increases, we have these as individual year impacts. So they're not compounding on top of each other. It's seen as these years being, again, over a 2022 budget. Same thing then with interest income. We're switching over to a PMI interest funds. Some maneuverings with the Fed and adjusting interest rates is kind of helping some of our investments, if you will, as we try to balance out the inflation factors across the economy. So in looking for 2023, it seems like it's reasonable that we could increase our projection from what we had as a $40,000 increase to $68,000. Now, again, then the following years, I'll recommend that we kind of tailor it back down to a more conservative approach, again, not knowing exactly where everything's going to fall in balance. And this one, again, too, is seen as an individual year allotment and not a compounding factor because it's a, you know, it's a revenue source with validity, if that makes sense. Changes then that we took action on is then on 209.01. So when balancing our bottom line, then we shifted those added revenues that we're visualizing from 2023, pushed it all the way out to 2025. Now those funds can be slid back and balanced to 2024 or however decisions we arrive at today or before finalizing the budget. Do keep in mind though with your ARPA funds on line 209.01, those funds have to be allocated in 2024 and spent in 2025. So if we approach the feds and say we're using it as lost revenue in 2025, we'll be okay. We just have to show expenditure of all those funds and then close out in 2025. And again, our worksheet then, this puts us at a balance right now for 2023 and for 2024 built on the assumptions of reductions underneath the one directives to various committees and other assumptions built throughout the entirety of the document. So those are kind of the two main report elements of which I feel I can brief you on prior to engaging. All the other items are kind of based in the realm of discussion and possible action. Mr. Chair.
Question. ARPA funds, they'll be available through 2023, is that correct?
Through, they have to be committed in 2024 and then spent off by 2025.
Oh, okay. All right. Thank you.
Chair,
Yes, please.
I just spoke to Mr. Sieb. Is he on your committee?
No.
Okay, then that doesn't help. Sorry.
I do
He was
see-
having trouble getting connected, but that doesn't help.
You see Supervisor Murphy Lopez.
I think Sean is on the committee, so. Hello, Sean.
Mr. Chairman, I because of my age and my youth, I had difficulty connecting. I'd like to be your guest.
Yes, you can be. We don't have a quorum as of yet, but I believe Sean is with us now. That makes a quorum. So I will officially call the meeting of the Finance and Personnel Committee to order. Was it properly noticed and posted?
We were noticed and posted. As discussed, I would ask though for an agenda approval, recognizing the typo on the date. We posted the meeting here today at 1 p.m. Tuesday, August 10th. It's obviously a Wednesday. Conferred with Corporation Counsel, and he is comfortable as well in having this as typo as we did due diligence with posting it. It reflects an August 10th date on the website. Our minutes and recorded video all also reflect an August 10th.
Thank you. We have a 16-point agenda. I'll entertain a motion. Thank you, Mr. Gotchel. Do I have a second, Mr. Manning? All those in favor of the agenda approval signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? We have an agenda approved. The previous meeting minutes of August 2nd. Do I have any corrections, additions?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Thank you, Mr. Lopez Murphy. Do I have a second? Mr. Carroll seconds. All those in favor of approval of the previous meeting minutes signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We have approved the minutes. Takes us down to number 5. Discussion and possible action on economic development resolution on idle sites grant.
Mr. Chair, looking today for a motion to recommend 3 different little pieces to it. First, resolution to the Richland County Board to participate in the WEDC, Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation Idle Sites Grant. 2, to authorize required time from Economic Development and Administration to apply, administer, and close. And 3, to fund added single audit requirements for fiscal years in which the grant is open. Background on this item is that Bethlehem Lutheran Church has approached the county through the Richland Economic Development Board with a petition for the county to participate as a grant applicant administrator for the Idle Sites Redevelopment Program grant. Bethlehem Lutheran is anticipating roughly $120,000 to $130,000 in eligible development through the grant for completion of renovations to the Rockridge Schoolhouse. The Idle Sites Redevelopment Program offers up to $500,000 to Wisconsin communities to implement redevelopment plans for large commercial and industrial sites that have been idle, abandoned, or underutilized for a period of at least 5 years. Approved projects can use funds for demolition, environmental remediation, rehabilitation, and infrastructure improvements defined in a redevelopment plan to advance the site to shovel-ready status and enhance the site's market attractiveness. Grants may be made to cities, villages, towns, or counties, tribal entities, or governmental entities for idle industrial sites exceeding 5 acres in size, for idle industrial parcels exceeding 5 acres in size, or for idle commercial sites exceeding 10 acres in size. The redevelopment is where redevelopment is impeded due to existing site conditions. So we do have with us here today Pastor Dan and Director Glassbrenner. If there's further questions on this, our involvement in this project is going to be to actually do the applying for the grant, to administer the grant, and then to close the grant with partnership of Bethlehem Church being the recipients of the funds and conducting all the construction and the renovations. Anticipating up to about $175,000 in admin hours, or seen as in-kind, to apply, administer, and close, and up to $1,000 in added single auditing expenses. So an estimated total possibility of $2,750 of county contribution into this for a impact project, again, of $120,000 to $130,000. Mr. Chair, I would defer to questions to Director Glassbrenner and Pastor Dan.
Right, with us, we have Economic Development Director Jason Glassbrenner and Pastor from Bethlehem Lutheran, Pastor Dan. So questions for either of them or make a comment? Mr. Carroll.
Sure. I just don't know anything about the project. I wonder if they could tell us what it will be.
Go to a mic, please, sir.
So what this project will be is renovating the former Rockridge Elementary School to convert it into a senior center as well as an early childhood center for offering preschool and childcare. And so the project involves bringing all the classrooms up to code and for being able to furnish licensing requirements and get each room ready for being able to offer when this is all completed, a 50 child capacity 0 to 5 program, as well as a senior center working with the senior nutrition program and meal site.
You're anticipating 120 to 130,000 in eligible development. Is that the total cost of the project that you expect?
Total cost of the project, counting what has been done to date, is about $650,000. So this is for the final portion of of what's needed to finish the project.
Okay, Jason, make a comment, please.
So yeah, to be clear, so they've got projections they're working with WEDC on, and I think this next phase was around between 300 and 400. So they're eligible because we're a distressed county, we're a distressed economic area. They're actually eligible for up to 50% of their costs. So Dan's got projected 300 to 400,000, so they would be eligible up to 50% of that, or wherever it falls. So there's a whole process that WDC goes through, very specifically line item by line item to make sure that, you know, the costs that Dan is proposing in his project are suitable to the grant. And then of the suitable costs, the grant would cover up to 50% in a distressed county. So all in all, Dan has done an exceptional job. I mean, I know that he was awarded a grant from the county through ARPA. So you've probably seen a lot of his work in preparation. Very, very highly prepared individual with great vision and plans. And so this project is very supported by WEDC. The Red Board heard this and asked some pointed questions in regard to the project at the Economic Development Board, which was held on Monday morning, and was the board's decision to go ahead and forward this on to the county for approval. So I think that's, you've received a lot of the main points in summary here, but glad to continue to ask questions if there are any.
It's a worthy project, and a lot of work has already been done. I'm sure you'd welcome visitors.
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead, Mr. Seep.
uh,
This is Supervisor Don Seep
Yeah.
from the Casnovia area asking a question, I think.
yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. A couple of questions perhaps for Dan. One is this grant being applied for in the name of a nonprofit 501c?
That is correct.
And what is the legal name of that corporation?
I'd be Bethlehem Lutheran Church.
I see. Okay, thank you.
Okay. I think, yes, Mr. Carroll.
So does that mean this facility will be a nonprofit entity?
That is correct.
Okay.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, I'll make a
Yes,
motion
Ms.
to,
Murphy Lopez, yes.
I'll make a motion as it's written in the cover sheet, the three-part motion.
Yes. I can't find the cover sheet, but yes. So we have a motion by Murphy Lopez, seconded by Mr. Gotchel. So could we restate the motion, please?
Motion to recommend one resolution to the Richland County Board to participate in the WEDC Idle Sites Grant, and the draft resolution is in your packets as well. 2, to authorize required time for economic development administration to apply, administer, and close. And then 3, to fund added single audit requirements for fiscal years in which the grant is open.
Okay. Thank you. So we have a motion, a three-part motion before us, and a second. We need to send this on to the county board. All those in favor of the motion indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, we have it accomplished. Thank you. Number 6, discussion and possible action on transfer of startup funds for the 2022 Richland County Fair.
Mr. Chair, looking today for a motion to recommend resolution to the Richland County Board to transfer $15,000 from the general fund to the Richland County Fair Revolving Fund 68 for use by the Fair Recycling and Park Standing Committee in conducting the 2022 Richland County Fair, with this appropriation being for a period of 30 days. Background on this item: each year it is necessary for the county board to make a temporary appropriation from the general fund to the Richland County Fair Revolving Fund for use by the Fair Recycling and Park Standing Committee in conducting the year's county fair. $15,000 is temporarily transferred from the general fund to the revolving fund, with appropriations being paid back 30 days. The funds are transferred back on October 1st. This is a reoccurring and historic practice, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. So this is something we do every year. Gets them going, fills up the cash boxes so they can make change, sell tickets.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Thank you, Mr. Murphy Lopez. Do I have a second? Mr. Manning seconds. I think Mr. Carroll had a question. Nope, he was only trying to make a motion. All right, we have a motion and a second to advance the fair fund. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, the resolution or the motion is adopted. Okay, number 7. Discussion and yes,
Sorry, go ahead.
discussion and possible action on funding the radio tower project.
Mr. Chair, looking today for a motion to approve general fund use to pay for emergency radio tower improvement project until GO bonds are sold to replenish use balance. Background on this item, the Richland County Board has moved forward with an authorization resolution to sell $8.5 million in general obligation debt bonds to finance the proposed radio tower improvement plan. The Richland County Public Safety Committee is recommending 2 resolutions to the Richland County Board to continue the project by extending a contract with True North, our consultant, and contracting with GenCom for design and implementation. With the use of the general obligation bonds to fund this project, there is an 18-month window to complete the project from the time of the borrowing. Based on the timeline with our consultants, we're looking to sign a contract following approval of the August 16th, 2022 adoption of a resolution. With this in place, we're looking at approximately $413,000 in change for the first milestone payment for the project, and an additional $300,000 is anticipated in immediate needs for console replacement and door locks. Their payments will begin in September, and we're anticipating the use of the general fund. When bond sales are executed in January of 2023, the general fund will be replenished with the same amount. Funds from the January bond sale will be received in February 2023. We will allow until this will allow until August of 2024 to complete the project under one bond sale.
Thank you.
Treasurer Evan is here. Treasurer Even is here to talk in regards to our availability of liquid funds in our general fund to be able to float these projects for that duration of time.
County Treasurer Even, can you speak to that, please?
Can you hear me?
Cool.
All right. So yes, as Administrator Langer stated, we have an 18-month window to complete the project within the time of borrowing. It's anticipated this project will take a total of 24 months. So we are looking to essentially float that first $700,000 out of our general fund. This would come out of our LGIP balances, or what's considered our contingency funds, which currently sit around 14.3 million. So essentially we would be borrowing from our savings account to fund this for ourselves. And then as Clint said, in February, we would be replenished for that same amount back into the fund.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions to Treasurer? So we're doing a bridge loan to ourselves is what we're doing here.
Essentially, yes.
Okay, sounds simple. I'm going to call for a vote.
I don't know if we have a motion yet.
Motion. I need a motion, don't I? We have a motion, don't we? Yes, we do. Did we? Carol, do we have a motion?
I think I jumped the gun. I was pretty excited. I cut you off even to get this one spit out.
Administrator jumped the gun.
Yep.
Okay. Someone give me a motion. Mr. Manning, do I have a second? No second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Murphy Lopez. Okay, so we have the motion and the second to basically use our funds to bridge us over until we actually get the bond funding accomplished. Okay, and then we'll pay ourselves back.
discussion.
Mr. Carroll.
Yeah. When the tower project first came up, I mentioned then, and I've mentioned before, I'm concerned about the cost in relation to all the rest of the economic and financial concerns we have. After reading through True North reports, I felt like option 2 would get us much further than we are right now, and that the extra roughly 2 million to get to option 3 didn't seem like it was worth it to me. So if I understand correctly, we have not expended any effort to this point that would have True North or anyone else do design on option 1 or option 3. So if we commit to this bridge loan and then they start work on option 3, we've pretty well come to that fork in the road. So I would not vote in favor of this unless we switch to option 2.
Okay, thank you. Now, if anyone else has a question concerning that, we'll need an explanation of all the options at this point. And I can't do that. Do we have, Sean, are you familiar with the 3 options?
No, I'm not. I was going to ask Steve if he could explain what percent coverage the option he's looking at would give us. I remember that the percent with the option that I believe we've already indicated we wanted to go with was 95-95. Like, was that 95% of the time outside and 95% of the time inside, or something funny like that? I just remember at 95%.
I think 95%.
I'm wondering what
95% of our area, right? 95% of the time is
Right. And option 3 gets us close, but even option 3 doesn't get us to 95-95. I think it was 92. Option 2 obviously is not that good at coverage, but it's still much better than we have now. And in my mind, I just couldn't see the extra 2 million and the towers justified based on all the other financial concerns we have.
Steve, what's the percent for option 2?
I don't have it in front of me right now, but I want to say it was 90. Maybe Sheriff Porter might recall.
Without having it in front of myself, I'm not sure the exact, but I don't think it was. I mean, I think we went with option 3 because it was going to be quite a bit of an improvement, whereas the other 2 options weren't that great of an improvement over what we already have. That's my recollection of the projects.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Sheriff, but option 3 was the only option that produced any viable improvement for the outlying areas such as Casanova and Viola, correct?
That is correct.
That was not my reading of the report, but it's been a while since I read it.
so it puts me in a quandary here.
May I,
Yes,
Mr.
Barb.
Chairman?
Yes, please.
Treasurer Even is correct in that the coverage area of Viola and of Casanova, there are maps that demonstrate this very clearly. You certainly have the option to go to the lesser one, but it will not cover those population centers. And when the committee considered it, they decided that covering the population centers was the goal that we had to have. And we couldn't meet that goal by going with the lesser towers.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Barb. I guess if we approve this borrowing from ourselves scheme, I shouldn't call it a scheme, plan, I suppose it would not preclude our changing course and going with a lesser option, would it? In other words, is a vote today on this funding mechanism tantamount to approval of option 3?
I can answer that. So you've got resolutions coming forward to Tuesday's meeting from your Public Safety Committee that it's extending our contract with True North to have them continue on as our consultant, and then entering into the proposed option through GenCom, them beginning to turn the wheels on that. So in order for those resolutions to go forward as they're currently drafted, it's based on the premise that we're going to execute borrowing down the road, and this element is needed then to fund that scheme. If it's a no vote today, then the resolutions aren't going to be able to carry. We'd be looking for some type of guidance then on how you want the funding to be rearranged to understand what that looks like. If it's rather do a double borrowing type of a thing, but those things would have then operational impacts on executing and getting into the projects, and some of the urgency on trying to get the projects moving is, in fact, you have to try to get the councils replaced, as we've had continued failures with those, and I would let the sheriff speak on the council needs. Does that answer your question?
Well, yes, it does. And I know there's I mean, we've been pondering this issue ever since I've been on the board. So, but now we need to get it started. I guess that's the final. Let's get it going.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Mr. Heath,
is it an appropriate time for me to ask a question?
it is.
I was interested in Mr. Evans' comment with regard to the one option that, or the particular option that does not cover Cazenovia, and is it Viola, I think he said. Why would we pick an option that does not provide coverage to those two areas?
Who are you asking? Is that a rhetorical question, Mr.
It
C?
is a rhetorical question, whoever wants to answer it.
Mr. Chair,
Yes,
would it
Mr.
be,
Murphy Lopez.
I'd like to make a motion to table this until later in the meeting so that someone can look up the report. And it sounds like people are saying different things are in the report, and it'd just be nice to have the facts of the report in front of us. So maybe I give someone time, I don't know who it is on staff who could do that, but someone time to pull up option 2 and show us that it doesn't cover Cazenovia and Viola, and show us the percent coverage we get.
Okay, I have a motion to table discussion until later in this meeting. Do I have a second? Mr. Carroll seconds.
Mr. Chair, point of order, it would be a motion to postpone.
All right, postpone. I thought we had this.
I think this is a motion. I think the exact language would be to lay it on the table, which means we're just, a postponement is to another meeting. And we can't debate tabling something until later in the meeting. That's what our research had shown when we changed our county board rule on this.
Well, we have then a motion to lay this on the table till later in this meeting, and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, we'll take this up a little bit later, and hopefully have the results from the analysis.
When you're, Mr. Chairman, when
Yes.
you're ready, I have those maps to demonstrate what I'm speaking of. If that's what the committee is looking for. I don't know what they're looking for what's in the report. It's in the LEJC folders on your iPad. It's in the county board folders on your iPad.
Okay.
But I'd be happy to put those up on the meeting screen if you'd like. When you're ready, let me know.
Well, I'm ready if you want to do it now. While we're on the topic. So.
Okay, let me pull them up just 1 second.
Mr. Chairman, has there been action on the motion to postpone or table, lay it on the table?
Yes. But now it is late. Now it is later in the meeting, and now we're addressing it again.
Okay. Then we have to have a motion to bring it back off the table.
Mr. Chair, I think the intent of my motion to lay it on the table was that we be able to see what option 2 says. So yes, I've seen that map too, but that's not going to answer question. The question is the percent coverage for option 2, and also would Cazenovia and Viola be covered under option 2?
Well, okay, then while that question is pondered, I think we'll move on. Takes us down to budget items. Correspondence and reports from the referendum ad hoc committee, number 8. And who's reporting on this?
I can start with the oral report. So we had our second meeting with the referendum committee. Discussion continued in regards to education efforts. We're beginning to parcel out tasks on who's going to be able to help in facilitating what items. We did have some additional information requests also coming from committee members that we're looking to engage with. Main message that received from the committee still coming back to finance and personnel is to request to have an understanding of where the financial 2023 year is going to be and what the projections going forward are, either through resolutions or through amendments to the worksheet, so that a referendum question could be built and designed around that. I would defer to Supervisor Murphy Lopez, the chair of the committee, if there were additional items that he wanted to bring forward.
Hey, Mr. Murphy Lopez.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, so the other main topic of conversation that I think is worthy of bringing to this committee today is we made a motion or took action to start drafting talking points for communication with the community. And that would be regarding the work of the committee, not actually, what a referendum would be, because we haven't decided whether or not we're making a recommendation on a referendum. And there was a little debate on the committee, although we ended up passing that motion, about whether we were overstepping our bounds laid out in the resolution. So I think the question to the committee is, does anyone have any objection to us developing talking points for the community about the work of the committee and what we will be doing over the next several months?
Okay, committee, do you want to respond to that question? I'll respond. I think it's only appropriate that you do that. I don't know how you could have an ad hoc referendum with discussion without laying out the issues. So yes, I agree. You must do that. Anyone else? Okay, I think we won't have a motion on this, but we're not going to censure you if you do this, okay?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Cover what we needed to cover? Okay, takes us down to correspondences or correspondence regarding wages. Mr. Langred.
Mr. Chair, motion today may be pending discussion. If there is discussion, background on this, several department heads have sent correspondence expressing concerns on wages and preliminary actions taken to reduce proposed wages. The reports were attached for review by the committee and looking to see if there's any warranting to discussion. We did have in 3 different petitions, one coming from ambulance, one coming from Health and Human Services, one coming from Pine Valley. 2 of those department heads are present here today. Administrator Rislow is not able to join us here in person today. I'm not sure if Tom is online. Doesn't look like he is, but I do have 2 out of 3 if there were any questions regarding their correspondences as well.
I personally read the correspondence, and they all seem pretty valid arguments to change the proposed structure. Someone else can weigh in on this. Did you all get a chance to read them? We have 2 of the writers here today. Maybe I could call on them. Darren Gudgeon, our Emergency Services Director, and Tricia Clements from Health and Human Services Director is here. So, Mr. Gudgeon, why don't you kick it off?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, I'd just like to start out by saying I completely understand the challenge that the county board is facing, and being a lifelong county resident, I want to be a part of the solution. And at the same time, I also want to make sure that I'm able to maintain a high quality ambulance service. And so that's why the petition to you folks on the Finance and Personnel Committee. Now, with that being said, with the salary that has been assigned to me, the position of emergency manager and ambulance service director, the increase that you have chosen at the 4.5, I feel is more than adequate. And I'm not asking for addition to my position salary. The wage increase I'm asking for the people that are actually, in the back of the ambulance providing care. And I've given several examples of communities. I didn't go county to county because I think that's an unfair representation. Richland County is not Sauk County. Sauk County is not Lafayette County. Lafayette County is not Barron County. Barron County is not Rusk County. We all have our own unique features and we all have our own challenges. But what I did want to do is point to ambulance services in the immediate area that in recent years have had to go out and hire staff just to meet the administrative code 110, DHS 110. And some of you might remember back in 2014, we actually had to self-report to the state of Wisconsin because we were not covering ambulance call. And so we had to hire some staff. And since then, we have met administrative code now going on 7 years and have developed a real strong ambulance service. As other communities start to realize that they're going to have to hire staff too, those initial starting wages are well above ours. $16 an hour is that's the lowest, and we're at $13.95. And it's not something that I can just go out and hire somebody off the street because to become an advanced EMT, it's 2 college courses, a 4 college credit course, a 5 college credit course that takes 1 year. So filling those gaps, I can't just go out on the street, grab somebody, bring them in and say, today you're a licensed provider. They have to be educated and licensed and it's a very competitive market and we keep sliding backwards. So my biggest concern is retention of staff. Recruitment, of course, is a secondary. And I want to make sure that, the folks that are doing the job are being compensated for the skill set that they have and what they bring to the community as far as providing pre-hospital care. So I think the letter's self-explanatory, so I won't drone on about that, but I will answer any questions that anybody has.
Darren, isn't this something that could be handled by steps rather than, in other words, are those people being hired into the right step?
Well, they're certainly being hired into the right step with the way the language and the policy is right now. But that step that they're being hired into is still well below. So if you go all the way to step 8, I believe we're still just maybe nearing what all these other communities are starting out at, if that answers the question.
I mean, they're paying people down at the fast food joints more than $13 an hour, aren't they? I think.
Yes, yeah, and I hate to sometimes use some of those references because I think in some ways it can be maybe demeaning. You can go to Quick Trip and earn $15 an hour. Well, I worked in customer service for a while too in retail, and I tell you what, I'd rather have a patient who needs my services than an upset customer. So, but certainly what I think it does point to the fact is that we're seeing a trend in Wisconsin, and we're seeing it nationwide, but I think even more so in Wisconsin, is that since 1968, EMS has been delivered on the backs of volunteers. And it was never about the care, it was about the transport. Now, our staff, the Richland County ambulance staff, we're administering drugs like Zofran for nausea, Toradol for pain management, Nitro for chest pain, different dextrose for different diabetic emergencies, naloxone for drug overdoses, ipratropium bromide and albuterol for severe asthma attacks, epinephrine, IV fluids, airway management to include intubation. These are things that these skill sets are being hired in UW Hospital, Gunderson Hospital, Viroqua Hospital, Hillsborough Hospital, because it's a skill set that no longer is just put them on a cot and drive fast to the hospital. We're making a difference in the field prior to, which is having better outcomes. So it's not the same service that it once was, and we're starting to feel that transition of licensed healthcare provider today versus community first aid and transport 20 years ago. And that's not to diminish what those before me have done. But a $13.95 wage, starting wage, isn't comparable to what they're able to make at a community in Mineral Point. With a call volume of 480 calls a year, I talked to the chief today. They're starting out their pay, I think it was $20 an hour. Dodgeville, Wisconsin, now just had to hire staff. They're at $16 to $18 an hour starting with retirement, protective services retirement, health insurance through ETF. Lodi, another small community, again, 16 to 18 with experience. Even our own paid on-call volunteers, which we have an amazing group, when they're out on a call, they're paid $21.50 an hour during the weekday. So we're compensating them like we should be for the position they play and the role they play. But those that are on duty 24/7 here at the station, which has really kept us in line with administrative code, they can make less. Or they're making less, I should say. One example that I have that I'd like to share, if you go onto Gunderson Health System's website, they're in a big recruitment phase right now. And 2 of our people were actually approached by Gunderson Health Systems to work at the station over in the North Industrial Park. And so I went on their website, and for a position at the Richland Center station with Gunderson Health System, which is only doing interfacility, they're not licensed to do 911 here, with my 17 to 24 years of experience, puts me at a starting salary of $72,000 a year. And that's just going back and treating people. So anyways, again, I promise not to drone on. I don't mean to do that. And I certainly don't mean to present myself in a manner of being ignorant to the challenges that the county is in. And I want to make sure that I'm a partner to that. But I think we need to please consider the wages that we're paying our full-time, part-time advanced EMT staff.
Okay, thank you, Darren. Tricia, you wrote a letter.
I'm really new to Richland County, and so I don't know if I have a ton of room to talk, but when I came here, the employees did talk about the proposed wage increase that was on the table. They were very excited about it. They were optimistic that we would become comparable county and be compensated for the work they're doing, that other counties are doing the same thing. It was really punch to the gut the day that the committee made the decision to go back to the 4.5% or go to 4.5%. They're really feeling like they're responsible for the choice of it's either provide services or I get less wages. And so they're really worried about how they're going to provide for their families with increased food costs, increased gas costs, the increase of insurance that we feel or believe is coming. And so I just really ask that you reconsider, that you let us work on the budget, see what we can work into it with these wage increases, see what can be done before you make that final decision.
Thank you. And Tom isn't here, but yeah. Okay.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Mr. Gudgeon's going to make one more point.
Okay.
One final point, I should have brought this up during my speech, I guess, is the original budget that I presented at the Joint Ambulance Committee, which was based on the initial guidance from Administrator Langrick, it was absorbed into our operational budget. So in no way would the increases to staff have an impact, or would I propose anything that would have an impact to the county tax levy? This would be covered by our operations and our ability to, to do more transfers and things like that. So.
Okay. Tom Rislow sent us correspondence, and basically he asked that we reinstate the original plan that Administrator Langrick proposed. If we can't do that, he thinks that at least we go to the COLA adjustment. The same COLA that we're giving the rest of the county should apply to Pine Valley.
Mr. Chair, I believe,
Mr. Murphy Lopez.
yeah, I think Steve Alexander from Pine Valley was wanting to speak. He was unmuted earlier.
Oh, okay. Steve, are you there?
Yes, I am. Thank you.
Please address us.
I have Tom. He's having some audio trouble. I have him on speakerphone if anybody has any questions for him about the petition that he had put out.
Otherwise, Steve, I could say that I did hear both Darren's comments and Trish's comments, and I would echo the last thing that Trisha said, that to give us the opportunity to present our budgets and to show how the wage increase would affect our bottom line, and to allow there to be consideration for possibly going ahead with the originally proposed increases at that time.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair, I've got a couple comments or thoughts to share.
Let's go ahead, Mr. Murphy Lopez.
So, first of all, I was doing the calculation for the advanced EMTs, and it looks like with the current proposal, they'd be getting $14.58 starting January 1st. So I know that Darren, you were using the current starting salary, but I just wanted to clarify that we would be going up almost 60 cents, or roughly 60 cents or so, with a 4.5% increase for general government. I'm looking at the county pay plan too, basically the resolutions we passed, and it looks like once folks pass probation, they can also be moved up a step. So that's I believe probation is 6 months. So that would be roughly, it looks like another 40 cents or so after 6 months. And also, I think you're right, Mr. Chair, that if someone's got experience, they can be placed at a higher step to start. But I believe Mr. Gudgeon's talking about beginning people. So not everyone is being paid $13.95 if they have more experience or they're higher up. That's not the wage of everyone, is at least that's my understanding, and of course correct me if I'm wrong. And then regarding Pine Valley, I think one of the interests that I've had is seeing if Pine Valley can cover an amount, and we passed a motion to this effect at the last finance meeting, cover half of their mortgage payments. So one thing I'd be curious about, Mr. Rislow, is seeing if you could, what will happen to your bottom line if you were to increase from that 3.5% up to 4.5%? Would you be able to make half of the mortgage payments? That's one thing I'm interested in. Thank you.
Thank you. So, does anybody wish to make a motion concerning this correspondence? And I'm thinking that motion could be made to instruct Administrator Langrick to consider these revisions, I would suppose, in our directives when we contemplate the final budgets for these respective departments. I don't know if that's appropriate or not, but I'm thinking it is. Mr. Carroll?
Yeah, it sounds like we're also being asked whether they could, again, take it back to their committees and do some other work with other possible ways to get there. And I think that's also what they're asking for.
Yeah, I think that's a reasonable approach. I mean, it's, yes, an amount was mentioned early on, and people began working with that level. And then we changed it, and yes, everyone's affected, but are they affected the same way? And I guess in the interests of equity and looking at all aspects, I think it's fair that another cut be made of this. So, someone make a motion, or we're just going to continue?
I make a motion, we let Clint look into this deeper.
Okay,
And, I don't see anything wrong with that at all.
no. All right, Manning makes the motion. Advice, further consideration. Do we have a second to that?
Mr. Chair, I'll second with discussion, please.
Thank you, Mr. Gaccio. Discussion.
Mr. Chairman, may I join the discussion?
You may, Mr. Gaccio's first.
So the proposal here is to see what can be absorbed in individual budgets. Am I
I think
tracking that?
that's the gist of it, I think, yeah.
Okay. I would just encourage us not to go down, or if we go down that path, to go down it with full understanding that we've tried in the last few months, excuse me, to do some department specific adjustments based on surplus and budgetary considerations of those individual departments. And I think that we ultimately decided not to do that to in the name of equity for the smaller departments that don't have that type of leverage. So I think this is a fine idea, and I'm actually personally in favor of the original request. I just hate to go down this path again if we're not willing to consider individual departments separately and what they can do with their budgets.
Thank you. Anyone else? Mr. Seep?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm thinking about the original admonition that was given us by Carlson Detman with regard to people who are working in the health care field. Right now, we're talking about Pine Valley, I guess, and the folks who are doing healthcare work in EMS. Just this morning, there was a news release from DHS stating that there is a shortage of 36,000 healthcare workers, many, mostly the folks who are providing care in nursing homes at present, and that trend is continuing to be in the negative. People just do not come to work and endure the difficulties and the sacrifices and the dangers of that work, given all that's come about with the pandemic. And so the wage incentive is essential. We must, I think it's important once again to remember that we were told very clearly that you can't treat the healthcare industry in the same way that you do the rest of the county. His words were, it's a different animal.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Administrator Langrick.
Yeah, I guess I would like just a little bit more clarification on the intentions here. If this is, are we specifying it to the 3 departments that have expressed letters now? My concerns will be, well, then if we're going to take action there, I will have more departments that are going to be producing letters, most likely for the follow-on meetings. And we lead right back to the same conversation of we should be doing things for everybody, which leads to me making budget proposals of trying to do something for everybody, which leads to us then realizing that it costs a lot of money to do things for everybody. And we have the talking points then on why we want to reduce it back down. And I don't want to go into the same cycle again. So I'm looking for, if there's more specified, clear guidance on who we want to try to incorporate this so we don't need those same talking points. If it is along the lines of folks that have access to being able to bring in revenues or off balances so it's not a levy impact, something to frame it so we don't go into the same cycle. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chair, if I could follow up with
Go ahead.
comments. Yeah, I do believe this is going to send us off into an area of confusion. We already are at the point where we're going to be sending to most committees some pretty big budget cuts. So if we give higher wage increases, those cuts are going to be deeper. So I think the most pertinent example in the room here is with Health and Human Services. So we already have a $350,000 cut identified for them in the Veterans Department in one of the resolutions. So yeah, if we go back up to 9%, that's going to be more cuts that they're going to have to make elsewhere in the department. So my preference would be keep it where it's at right now and see what they come back with as far as how they're going to make up for, and we haven't even finalized that yet. It could be more than 350,000. So I would just be a little more patient. So I would vote against this.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Gatto.
Clint, you perfectly articulated my concern from just a few minutes ago. So I believe I would be opposed to this as well. I would make a counter proposal, but do we want to vote on this first, or what's the order of?
No, you can tell us what you're thinking.
Okay. In a prior meeting, I mentioned the concern that the message that we're sending to the employees is that we had earmarked 9%. Here's why: cost of living, step advancement. We can't afford that, so we're just cutting it in half. That, to me, that doesn't send a message that we're driving towards something for the employees. So my proposal would be along the lines of what Administrator Brislow is suggesting here, that we approve a 5% COLA increase today, and then consideration further into the budget cycle for the 2-step advancement, if possible.
That's for Pine Valley.
My proposal would be countywide.
Countywide. Okay. Well, we have, yes, Mr. Manning.
Yes, what I wanted Clint to look into more was more specific to the ambulance, because they do have a way to bring in the revenue where a lot of our entities don't.
That's true. It's true. They are revenue producing. Okay, we have the motion that Gary made to basically send it back to Clint and allow departments to absorb some of the overage. I think that's the motion that's before us. We have some reasons why and for and against, so I'll call a roll call on this. And a yes vote will be exactly that, back to the drawing board. Call it. A no vote means, no, we're not gonna do that. We might do something else.
Okay, so this is a vote to send it back to the drawing board, to be looked at again. Sean Murphy Lopez,
No.
Brewer,
No.
Manning,
Yes.
Gotcha,
No.
Carroll,
No.
Is that it?
4 against, 1 yes.
Okay, so that motion is defeated. However, now I'm thinking a replacement motion should be made. I'm thinking, Mr. Gotcho.
Mr. Chair, I'd make a motion to increase our anticipated wage increase for 2023 to a 5% increase to match the cost of living allocation. That's the only side note. That's the only action I'm requesting in my motion, but I would like the motion to say with consideration for 2-step advancements later in the budget year.
And you're regarding Pine Valley, regarding HHS, regarding ambulance, or overall?
That is a good question. The guidance on the step advancement, 2-step advancement for the county, 1-step advancement for Pine Valley, again, to be considered later in the budget year, but 5% cost of living increase for the entire county.
All right, thank you.
Which is 0.5% higher than we have previously voted on.
Yes. All right, you heard Mr. Gotcho's motion. Do we have a second to that motion? Mr. Carroll seconds. He has comments or questions.
Sounds like the other parts of our costs, the health insurance and those things, are we going to stay silent on that for now?
Well, we have no control over them.
Well, we have controls to them, but we don't have the costings come back yet with a proposal for our existing plan with features that are still being worked at, as well as our costing coming back from ETF on what our premium would be, as well as their next year rates. I think their board meets in mid-September to determine what ETF health insurance plans are going to be.
Mr. Murphy Lopez, I'm going to ask you to comment on this motion.
It'd be very similar to what I already said. I think, we're already making drastic cuts. Committees and departments are going to have to look at how to do that. So, you raise the wages here, you're just going to have to make more cuts elsewhere. So the people who are left will probably get more money. The people's positions who we cut, they won't get any money. So I think we have to be a little more balanced here and just go forward with what we've got and see how much that's going to hurt already.
It seemed to me, though, that an unintended consequence of our last committee meeting where we cut everything in half was that Pine Valley ended up with a lesser COLA amount. So it seems to me, in a matter of fairness, that be the same COLA amount as, COLA's COLA. You can't say, well, you can't afford it, so your COLA is only 3% because your cost of living didn't raise as much as the rest of the county, which doesn't really sound good. So What else? Okay, right now we have a motion to move back to 5% on the COLA across the board. Does that do it? And I have a motion in a second. Any other discussion? All right, I'll call a voice vote on this. All those in favor of restoring COLA to 5% signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed?
No.
Okay, I'm a little,
I'll request a roll, Mr. Chair.
yes, let's do a roll call.
Okay, so the motion was to do 5% with 2 steps considered later in the year. Brewer,
Yes.
Manning,
No.
Gotcha,
Yes.
Carroll,
Yes.
Murphy Lopez,
No.
carried 3-2.
Thank you. Discussion and possible action on directive resolutions. Mr. Langrick.
Mr. Chair, looking today for motion to possibly amend and possibly advance to the county board for consideration. The attached resolutions that constitute a package for directives intended to help the county explore and solve financial problems moving into 2024 budget and beyond. The first one that's listed on here is the Fair Recycling Parks Directive, which is the one that we left off in our last meeting. But Mr. Chair, you can certainly take them in order that you would like.
No, we'll begin with the resolution notifying Fair and Recycling Coordination and Parks Commission for funding reductions. Yes.
Let me.
When you want, I've got the True North poll report pulled up whenever you want to go back to that.
Oh, okay.
Do you wanna-
Before we get into the resolutions, we should have a motion then to take back from the table our discussion on.
All right, I move that we bring that back on the table.
For the tower project. So are you making that motion?
I am, yes.
Motion by Carroll to take it back and seconded by Gotcho. All in favor of getting it back, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, we're back. I believe joining us now is Mike Day. And he's the expert. He's the guy. He knows, he has answers to all of our questions. Mr. Day, can you tell us the difference between, I think it was option 2 and 3?
Yeah, I think if I'm understanding correctly the question, the options, GenCom was one of the radio vendors, was the vendor that you chose to move forward with, and they provided the main option and then an alternate option, which is the one we essentially have been based our negotiations around, which was their 9-site design. And that's, essentially where our budget is based around as well. And then they did have a third option, which was a 6-site design. So essentially, I think those are the two that maybe you're representing or identifying as option 2 and 3. And so essentially, the difference there is 3 sites, which would then, kind of reduce the coverage footprint. And I think, when we talk about the coverage and the 95% coverage, indoor building coverage, we know that with that 6-site design, I think we were down to right around 90% coverage, if I remember right.
I have a question, but specifically it was the the assertion was made that Casnovia and Viola wouldn't have coverage. Is that true or false?
Yeah, that was certainly when we were talking about coverage and reviewing all the proposals. We did see the need for coverage improvements in those areas with the proposals, and I think that took us really to the 9 sites, knowing that likely one of those sites is a greenfield site. To service the area there of Viola, I think is where we saw the challenge in finding sites. Not to say we won't moving forward in the project, but I think that's where we added a greenfield site, and that impacted the budget a little bit as well.
Sir, Greenfield being a site in need of mitigation efforts?
Greenfield being, so the vendor identified one greenfield site in their design, a location where no tower exists that could service the area that they were trying to cover. So the county would then build a tower. So you're essentially, you've got to find some land, possibly purchase land if it's not, if you just have nothing in the area that you can use that's owned by another municipality. So there's those costs, and then you would erect a tower and own the tower structure yourself, and of course have your shelter and your generator equipment shelter as well. But those are the greenfield site is a location where we want to construct a tower where there is none to service the area.
I was confusing greenfield with brownfield, so I'm
Okay.
color confused. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to clarify my statement. I think it got maybe taken out of context. Option 3, and Mike, correct me if I'm wrong, option 3 was the only one that provided a material improvement in coverage for Viola or Casanova. It's not that they don't provide coverage. Option 2 and option 1 did not provide a material improvement in coverage for those areas.
Sheriff Porter.
I guess I want to comment because I think we're getting documents confused here with the option 1, 2, and 3 and the GenCom primary, GenCom alternate, and GenCom alternate 2. We're well past option 1, 2, and 3. We decided on that a long time ago. We're actually dealing with, I don't know if you want to call them plans, basic plans maybe, but for radio systems, we selected GenCom alternate 1, as Mike was explaining earlier. The option 1, 2, and 3, I mean, that we're going backward steps where we're going to start over with a proposal process, and we can't afford to go backwards to start over with a proposal process. Well, we can't afford to go backwards at all here. I mean, we could certainly select a different option that's been presented to us. I would caution against that strongly, but I mean, I think it's kind of being looked at that we picked the top tier proposal here, and we didn't. We picked an alternate proposal that we thought was going to fit our needs.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, I was going by the True North report, which does specifically mention options 1, 2, and 3. I've not seen the proposals from the contractors, so there may be more information I'm not aware of. But in these, on page 97, it pretty much says that option 2 is going to get you to roughly 70% indoor, 85 outside. Option 1 gets you to, I think, 92% indoor. So it's not quite 95, but obviously much better. And that was what I was going by, was that True North report. If there's some more information that I haven't seen, then I might change my position. But the other thing about this report is it just says Casanova and Viola would be challenging. That wasn't clear enough to me, and it sounded to me like it was still going to give us something.
I think for the purposes of moving things along, I'm going to ask or attempt to clarify. what's before us today is merely a request to fund bridge. If you ever built a house, you had to have a bridge loan. Bridge, you still owned a house and you didn't have any money, but so the bank gave you some toward the new house. And that's really what we're asking here. Can we bridge ourselves out until we get the bonding home to roost and pay ourselves back? And that's really what we're asking here. I think our debate has gone a little bit afield here, because I think a lot of the things we're discussing right now, we already decided. But they can certainly be discussed later. What I've tried to do is get us to say, yes, we'll approve borrowing money from ourselves too, because there are certain time parameters here that have to be met. And if we don't get started, we won't get the project completed in time. Does that make sense to everyone? Gary?
I have two questions. One, can we make a motion that would be a maximum amount, but doesn't necessarily mean that we have to bridge that amount? And number two would be for Mr. Day, I think. Isn't my understanding is the difference in money is the amount of towers we get. Am I wrong about that?
Mr. Day?
No, you're correct. And I think, I'm sorry, I didn't catch the previous gentleman's name, but yes, what you're looking at there in the options is the original or the initial study assessment. And so we have kind of gotten to further on with what we're looking at as far as the RFP responses. And I think just to kind of give you some assurance, we are taking into account those areas of Viola and Casanova, and so we're preparing ourselves to address those issues and areas and make sure they're covered. But yes, to the second question, essentially looking at the options, we're considering the 9-site design. That's the budget we've been tracking. If they're in looking at the lower design, the other option that we had from GenCom, that would be a decrease of approximately 3 sites, and there's some cost savings from the radio vendor, maybe $500,000, and then of course there's civil cost savings as well. So that's kind of yes, less towers mean less radio vendor costs, as well as less civil costs in a project. So,
Mr. Day, this is Chairman Brewer. I'm the voice you couldn't identify. As we're progressing on this project, if we, for some reason, discover we don't need a tower, can we decrease the amount of towers we put in?
that's correct. So we have our next step. Once you sign a contract with a radio vendor, and of course you within the language of the contract, if you sign the initial contract with 9 sites, and for whatever reason the design comes back with 8 sites or possibly even 7 sites, to provide the coverage ultimately that you want and will accept, you will get a change order and a credit from that contract and ultimately pay less. We've had this happen. We don't like to be way off, so I wouldn't, I'd be surprised if it got down to 7, but that's certainly available in the contract language. And ultimately we settle that in the next 6 months probably, or by the end of the year, with what we call the detailed design review process. So now we're going to go to these tower owners and make sure we can put your radio equipment on their towers, or in the case of a greenfield site, make sure we can build a greenfield site at that location. And then that kind of gives us our final design, which we will ultimately be building, unless something bad happens along the way. But, usually once we settle the DDR, that's the detailed design review. That's the system that's going to get built.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Carroll, are you ready to vote?
Yes, I'm ready to vote, but I would like direction to where those proposals are so I can read those.
What's your question? I didn't get it.
No, I'm ready to vote. I'm just saying I still want to read those proposals from GenCom.
Yes.
I have not seen them.
Okay. Cheryl, this was a long time ago now that we had a motion and we tabled it and then we brought it back. What is the motion again?
In looking for a motion to approve general fund use to pay for emergency radio and tower improvement project until GO bonds are sold to replenish used balance.
Right, and we do have that motion before us, correct, Cheryl? I mean,
I think the only motion we had was to table. No, there was a motion to use the funds to bridge that was done by Manning, seconded by Murphy Lopez.
yeah, and that's essentially what Clint just said, isn't it? So, okay, let's vote on that motion then. We're gonna give ourselves a bridge loan. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, the motion passes. Thank you. Now, Fair Recycling and Coordination and Parks Commission.
I did misspoke. In reference our minutes from the last meeting, we did leave off on the directive to the Education Committee. If you'd like to resume where we had taken action there, the committee left off on this project on August 8th. We had UW Platteville Leadership, UW Extension Office, Food Services 15D. Administrator Langrick reviewed the changes to the resolution. We had moved by Gottschall to amend by striking line 6, seconded by Williamson. Discussion followed on a strategic plan and possible problems that have been noted over the last several years. Then the call to the vote to strike line 6 failed, and that's where we had left off. So if you'd like to resume on our directive to UW Platteville Richland Center, or essentially to into the Education Standing Committee, Mr. Chair.
Where is that?
That would be item 10D, 10 Delta.
You've got it. Okay, so we were talking about the UW Richland, the education in particular. And
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion to amend.
okay,
So on this one, I'd like to make a motion to amend that points. This is regarding the UW Extension Office. So if everyone wants to follow along, it'd be the bottom of page 2 is where it starts. And I'd like to make a motion similar to the others. We've eliminated service consideration matrix. So I'd like to make a motion to amend to eliminate 11 and then replace the part highlighted in gray with a 20% reduction by 2024. And my thinking on this one is that a lot of our big departments, they're going to be hit with a 10 to 20% cut roughly. And this department has been hit with a more like a 50 to 75% cut. And so I'm just bringing it more in line with the other departments.
okay, the motion's been made then to change the service consideration matrix regarding the UW Extension Office to a 20% reduction rather than $100,000 levy by 2024 and 75,000 by 2026. Now, I assume that the 20% is from the 22 budget actual or 23 proposed, or where are you starting, Sean?
Yeah, it would be from the current year's budget, and I can figure out a dollar amount if people would rather have the dollar amount than the percent.
Well, just, we need to know where we're starting.
We're starting with $185,000 for the current budget, and so it'd be a reduction of 37,000.
Okay. Motion made. Do we have a second?
I'll second with discussion.
Mr. Carroll seconds.
Yeah, I guess my question is, what would that look like? I know that we're trying to leave the committees with latitude to come up with whatever they can, but I'm just trying to visualize what that particular one would look like.
Well, I think the education, if I can, Mr. Chair, the education committee is going to have to work with UW Extension staff to see where the $37,000 in cuts would be identified. So probably it could be, say, approximately one of our contracted staff or one of our part-time staff would be my guess. Is it somewhere in that range? The current proposal is more like taking out 3 staff members.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Murphy Lopez. So cutting staff. All right, we have the motion to change the service consideration matrix to a 20% rather than as stated. All those in favor of that motion to amend signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. That wording will be inserted, changed. Anything else?
Mr. Chair, on the same one, we've now eliminated the language about basically selling. We had language about selling Pine Valley, selling the fairgrounds, selling Simons, and we've still got this language in here about selling the campus, I believe. Can I ask Mr. Langrek, am I incorrect on that?
No, we still have the option languages that were laying out in the original proposal exist in this one. As you mentioned, it was taken out of Pine Valley, but this one we still have items 1 through 5, which were the initial items. 6 and 7 were added at I think at the last meeting.
Yeah, and thanks for giving me the time. It's under number 3 where we talk about selling the campus, and I'd like to make a motion to amend to remove points 1 through 5 in this. I think selling is just a bad idea, especially when it looks like our main problem right now is recruiting and admissions, and Platteville actively recruiting students away from our Richland campus. And we need leverage right now to be able to get that action to stop. So I think if we focus on 6 and 7, we can get there with them. I think if 1 through 5 are on the table, it's going to muddy the waters too much.
Are you making a motion?
Yeah, making a motion to amend to remove points 1 through 5.
Okay, does everyone know what we're talking about?
Put up here 1 second.
Point 1 is service consideration matrix. Okay.
Mr. Chair, I may be reading this incorrectly, but item 2 doesn't seem to reference that. It references the property being retained by Richland County, but exploring the options of an agreement with no levy. Sean, would you be amenable to leaving that one in, or do you have a rationale for striking that one as well?
Yeah, I guess, I really wouldn't mind that one being left in. It's just, it's the language about selling. I think the service consideration matrix is a little distracting. It's a little hard to understand what that is. Um, Number 4, ending services. That sounds really bad. No. Number 5, I think, that kind of goes with 1 through 4. So I guess I'm fine with number 2, like no levy, as long as we can leave 6 and 7 in there, which is it's an exchange of county funds for getting them to do a couple of different things, them being the Platteville campus and the foundation. So I'm fine with taking or leaving number 2 if we can get 1, 3, and 4 and 5 out.
I have a question that's shown. Number 3, the way I read it, it says develop a course of action where UW Platteville Richland operates with the occupancy of fewer buildings. And other property buildings are sold, leased, or rented by the county as necessary to generate revenue. So it seems to me, for instance, I'll just give you a for instance, if the UW extension is moved from East Hall, we've got quite a valuable property there. And what are we supposed to do with it if we don't allow ourselves to consider various options? That's my question.
Well, I would go back to the student enrollment back in 2014 when we had 500 students. This was right before we were placed under UW Platteville, and they started recruiting students away from our campus. We were using all of the buildings. We had a lively campus. So I think first we need the chance to be able to get our campus back from Platteville. And once we do that, I don't know that we may not have a lot of extra space. The reason we have that extra space right now is because of that recruiting away from our campus.
Mr. Manning.
Yes, Mr. Chair. I guess I hate to lose any options. I'm not saying I'm in favor of selling anything or not in favor, but I do like keeping our options open.
Right. Can we reword number 3? Keep our options open. Well, right now we have a motion to remove 1 through 5.
And Mr. Chair, I'm okay with it just removing 1, 3, 4, and 5. So if I could just if we have to vote the other one down, fine. But I would vote for just removing 1, 3, 4, and 5.
Does everyone understand what we're doing then? If he takes out, he's leaving in the existing agreement with no levy. He's leaving that one in, one Tim suggested. The rest of them, he wants to take out 1, 3, 4, and 5, which is service consideration, amend agreement, where we could sell off buildings or lease them, amend agreement in services. 5, develop a course of action that may be a combination of elements, but in which no foreseeable county levy dollars are needed for future operations after 2024.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Mr. Gotcha.
I'd make it a name for myself to belabor these things, but I just have one more thing. The number 3, I am kind of with your suggestion. Could we, I know it's semantics, but most of the other bullet points here have, if possible, in there. So if we investigated leaving 3 in there, develop a course of action, if possible, to bring it into the language that we've been using in other lines, and then remove buildings and grounds are sold, strike sold, and just have it read building and grounds are leased or rented by the county as necessary, again, as necessary to generate revenues, etc. Anyone else has thoughts on that?
I like it, but
Yeah, Mr. Chair,
yes,
I'd be amenable to that as well. I think still getting 1, 4, and 5 out of there, and then if we could just strike buildings and grounds are sold. I'm sorry, if we could just strike the word sold, I think that would be helpful too.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Seep, go ahead.
how would it sound to say that the committee is directed on this score to explore the possibility of more cost-effective and efficient use of the grounds and buildings, period? That generalizes it and yet calls on them to explore a number of options to bring about cost effectiveness and efficiency. You're not using the word sell buildings to scare people or to, more cost effective and efficient use of the land and buildings.
So
Sounds good to me, Mr. Chair. I think
Gotcha.
that language is more clear and to the point, be easier for the education committee to work with.
Would you accept that
Sounds good to
wording
me.
in your?
Yep.
Okay, so you're accepting Mr. Seeps, who is not a member of this committee, but he's a very concerned board member.
Mr. Chair, could I restate my motion to amend with all these ideas included?
Well, you may, if you're including Mr. Gotchel's motion, go ahead.
Oh, did you make a motion? I'm sorry. I don't mean to.
Well, I think he did, but it was amended by
I'm sorry.
Mr. Seep, kinda.
Mr. Chair, I think where Sean is going is where I want to be. So if I did make a motion, I'd withdraw that.
All right, he withdraws his motion. So Mr. Murphy Lang Lopez, I was going to say Murphy.
Okay.
Incorrect. I've been here too long. Murphy Lopez.
I'll take another shot at it. So I'll make a motion to amend to strike numbers 1, 4, and 5 from the resolution, and then strike number 3 as well and replace it with explore more cost-effective and efficient use of the land and buildings.
Okay. All right. Does everyone know where we are?
So does that need a second or did?
Yes, I think it does need a second.
I'll second that.
Carol seconds. So we're taking out 1, 3, and 4 and 5. 1, 3, 4, 5.
And replacing number 3 with the language that I read that Don came up with.
Roll call.
Roll call.
And I hope you don't want me to repeat that. Okay, we got Manning,
No.
Gotcha,
Yes.
Carroll,
Yes.
Murphy Lopez,
Aye.
Brewer,
Yes.
carries 4-1.
Okay, are we ready then to move the resolution regarding UW Platteville, Richland Leadership, UW Extension, and the food service on to board action next week?
I'd make that motion, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Gotchel. Do we have a second? Second by Carol. Those in favor of sending this to the board as an official resolution signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hi, Linda. Yes, go ahead.
Mr. Chair, I
Yes.
couldn't hear what she was saying.
What did you say, Mr. Murphy Lopez? We lost you.
I couldn't hear her comments.
She wants a copy of this amended resolution by Friday for the Education Committee.
We shall try our best, Mr. Chair.
They'll try their best. Okay, so we voted, right? 4-1. Okay. We can move on. Finally.
Hey, Mr. Chair, I think that we have, previous meeting, we did address the Simons and RED directive, Pine Valley directive, Joint Ambulance directive. We've now looked again the education. I think the ones, and I think we also looked at the fair recycling and parks at the last meeting. The two that I believe that we have not circled back around to is land and zoning directive and the various standing committees directive.
So let's take up land and zoning. We have a number that I'm supposed should be looking at for that.
That should be item number 10B, 10 Bravo.
B as in boy, there it is. I got it.
And this one, the amendments that have been taken out is we did remove from the original, we struck the ultimatum language that was taken out of all 7 of them. It still remains in here with items number 1 and 2.
Okay, it's asking for the committee to make a recommendation, submit the responses to the county administrator to present the rules and strategic planning. It's asking for a levy expenditure reduction of $50,000 entering into 2024 and a sustained reduction beyond. This is allowing for increases in COLA and compensation and other employee benefits. Gives them a completion date of June 6, 2023.
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion that this one get forwarded to the county board.
Thank you.
Second.
Murphy by Murphy Lopez, second by Gotchel. All those in favor of moving it to the board signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
All right. Boy, we're really flipping along now. Next one. Did we want to attack the resolution for the main cuts or not?
Mr. Chair, I don't have quite an idea of how to amend this one, but I do think that the dollar amounts are incorrect.
Where are you, Sean Murphy Lopez?
I'm on the one that Mr. Langrick's got open right now, 10C, the one to the standing, well, basically it'd be the major department standing committees, HHS, Public Safety and Finance and Public Works.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that the main issue I've got right now with the financial planning worksheet and this resolution is that these dollar amounts don't get us to a balanced budget. So we have, and this kind of gets back to my reason for being opposed to those wage increases, is we still have on page 17 of the financial planning worksheet, we've got a gap of, and thank you for going to this because I don't have it open on my screen yet. We've got a gap of, oh, you were close. There it is. 1 million in 25, 1.7 million in 26, and 5 million in 27. And another thing that I wanted to share that we talked about in the referendum committee was that there's all these positions that are suggested to be added further up in the document. And I pulled together a summary of those at the referendum committee, but I'll just list off a few that were in my mind. One FTE for a finance director, one FTE for HR director. There was one FTE in the sheriff's department, another patrol. There was one FTE for a radio tower person. There was a half FTE in MIS. I might be missing some. So we've kind of what we've kind of said here is we want to prioritize those positions, and then we want the standing committees to make $350,000 in cuts. And what I'm saying is all the puzzle pieces don't fit together for me right now to support this resolution. I think the dollar amounts have to increase in those future years to balance our budget, or we need to give the standing committees some flexibility to say, you know what, we don't want that extra position in the sheriff's department, or we don't want the, HR director, because we're going to have to make other cuts in the department that would just cancel those out. So I don't know where to go with this, but those are my thoughts at this point.
Administrator Langrick has a comment.
Supervisor Murphy Lopez, I really glad that you made your final point there on, yes, we have these other proposals that are in right now are different pieces that have been picked up with recommendations from departments, recommendations through strategic planning. There's a lot of things that are still out there that we said we want to do or that we feel we should do. And yes, it doesn't balance down, so it's zero all the way across. So again, in using this document as like a reference on this is what the future looks like to best get 2023 in position and start giving those guidances out. That's kind of where I was going with it. In fact, like in looking at this, the reductions kind of at the bottom right there may be more visual to kind of, I kind of hesitated on kind of adding those in there is it might exactly add up to that. It might come down to if you're going to require administration and the treasurer's department and register of deeds to say in that resolution, we need a reduction of $200,000. Well, then we're really going to have to look at, we said we want a finance department, and we said we wanted a maintenance position, and we said we wanted a HR director. Is that where we want to prioritize? Same things with like a sheriff's department and our other types of departments on here is the list of things that we've identified that we might need is also in the consideration. It doesn't just include things that are in a 2022 as well. So yes, I would agree that some of these items further up on the list may have to come off, and then you could visualize then in the scheme of how it's calculated off. If you're reducing out added costs up in section 4, then these numbers down here at the bottom of section 6, the 301 sections, those get reduced to balance, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
Go ahead, Sean.
Yeah, Mr. Chair. So it does help, but if we don't give the committee's guidance on what their dollar amount is, they're going to leave all that other stuff in up above. They're not going to want to take that stuff out. So that's why I'm saying we need our dollar amounts to increase in 25, 26, and 27 in order to balance the budget. Because otherwise, people aren't going to understand the impact of those wage increases. They want more wage increases, yet they don't really know because it's not written into the resolution. It's kind of hidden in this worksheet that they actually have to make more cuts. So I just want to be super honest and straightforward with departments and the public that we are asking for more cuts. And the referendum committee's got to know that stuff, because otherwise, how can we give recommendations for what the referendum amount should be?
Mr. Chair.
Yes, go ahead, Mr. Carroll.
So if I'm understanding Sean's point, we might reword this number 2 item to say 350,000 in 2024 or some number, and then a different number for each of the years after that, that's a larger number if we wanted to add those positions. They'd have to cut something else. Is that what you're saying, Sean?
That's exactly what I'm saying. Yeah, the numbers are good for 23 and 24, but they all break apart in 25, 26, and 27, and we need different numbers to be able to balance the budget that far out.
Okay. Our direction is really clear now. Go ahead, Mr. Carroll.
I would just, if I can comment real quick, I mean, in order to make those zeros on the bottom, you can do that by increasing on a section 6 here and say that we need to increase these numbers for each departments. At the same time, though, it's everything above that is, are you comfortable with these types of presumptions in there? So it's kind of like a line by line drill on trying to prioritize all that down and trying to, and I understand now where Supervisor Murphy Lopez is going is in trying to formulate a referendum question that might stretch out 5 years. They're looking for that, that number of how far do we need to exceed to reach that. But in reaching that number, it's based on quite a collection of variables of projections and also of presumptions on things that you right now that we're tracking as needs. So it's to balance it out on the bottom of reducing those, you can do that, but at the same time, it has to reflect on the top on where's our priorities on all these things up in section 4. And not just section 4, I'm sorry, with wages and trying to project health insurances and quite a few things.
And a number of personnel, Mr. Carroll.
So sure, yeah. So maybe one way to do that would be for now to that gap down there in the later years, just what it is, $1.2 million or $1.5 million or whatever, with the understanding that until any of the stuff above changes, that's the gap. And that way it's there in front of us to work with. Would that address your concern?
From my end, I'm hoping that we're using this document every year continually so that we understand how it's impacting our projections. Again, it's a challenge to try to refine the entire document down and be kind of committed to that, knowing all the different variable impacts as we trudge along. It becomes a challenge even making next year's budget fit when we adopt that. So trying to do that exercise and projecting that out 5 years does become a challenge. But I appreciate where Supervisor Murphy Lopez is going, though. It's like if you don't have some type of a plan in place that arrives at like a 0, then how do you know what to ask on a referendum question?
And Mr. Chair, I totally agree with Mr. Langreck. You got to deal with those issues further up. I'll just pick on one department, MIS. There's a lot of stuff in there for MIS. And there's a half FTE as well. But if they end up having to make a cut that would then say remove one of their full-time staff, would they still make the decision to add all those things up above? So right now, the way it's written, they're kind of operating in a vacuum. But I think the resolutions could be rewritten so that they have to take responsibility for certain lines within the worksheet further up. And I just don't think this resolution is ready to go to county board. I think it needs more work. And so what I'm kind of saying is I think we should postpone this resolution until we can get those numbers at the bottom to 0 out.
Administrator Langrick, does that sound doable?
If that's the request, I mean, at the same time, trying to get the 0 on the bottom are a lot of the same things that we're trying to reach out to committees to have them do for us. So we're gonna have to talk about a process on what that looks like. I can take it back with departments again and try to work it that way, but it's still going to come down to reductions then. So how you want to get that engagement on getting the department input, which was kind of the point and premise of the resolution, was to shell it out and say, what types of service reductions or cuts are you going to make with this imposed upon you to try to get ready for 2024, was kind of where I was going with it. If we bring it back, how, going back around to still get that engagement and understanding from your folks' perspective on what's going to what's going to get reduced. I don't know how we quite get there. It'll take some thinking.
Mr. Chair, can I respond to that?
Yes, go ahead.
Right now, they're thinking we have to make $350,000 in cuts. And then it's done. So that's the input we're going to get. We're going to get input about 350,000. But the real number is probably going to be closer to, I'd have to sit down and do the math. And yeah, I was kind of hoping Clint could do that. But it'd have to be $700,000 in 2025. And it'd have to be a little more than that in 2026. And so we're going to get a different quality of feedback based on the numbers that we give them. So I still want the feedback. I just want them to have the right numbers. And I don't think we need to wait too long. I think we just got to, we got to recalculate the numbers here.
It would, again, not to contradict, I guess, just to kind of get a premise on where I was with designing was that it wasn't going to be a one-time type of a fix-all. I think is going each year, you're going to have to be in the same type of drill practice that we're doing right now, where you're going to be setting next year's budget and then issuing a series of resolutions on how do we get ready for 2025, and then next year the same type of a thing. So that's kind of where I was going. We can certainly look at trying to try to get these to balance to zero. But again, it's going to be some very big decisions because it's big numbers, and how we arrive at that again with committees and folks feeling like they had input on it will be the process to figure out.
Well, whatever we do, it won't be ready for the next county board meeting. So, are you making a motion, Mr. Murphy Lopez, to?
Yeah, I'll make a motion to postpone until we can get section 7 zeroed out.
Okay, do I have a second to that motion?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Mr. Carroll. And Administrator Langrick's, his initial and original recommendations were based on the resolutions that we just significantly altered being adopted and basically coming through with levy reductions in all those areas. And that's why he was able to put a specific amount in this final recommendation. So without having definite ideas about reductions and savings and levy on the original 7 resolutions, it'll be very difficult for him to come up with numbers. However, we've asked him to do that in this postpone, and maybe he'll take a cut at it. I know he will. So, Mr. Carroll?
Yeah, Mr. Chair. Can you refresh my memory on where the actual 350 came from for these committees and what it's based on?
So those numbers, when we began kind of the calculations, and these numbers have changed time and time again as we went forward, kind of arrived at what that window looked like it was going to be to get when the ARPA funds started to trickle off. And so it wasn't, again, trying to arrive at a solution that was going to zero 5 years. It was trying to get us in the best position for 2024 and then onward to for a 2024 at the time, because we had more wage impact up in section 1. So that, again, that was my premise and my mindset, was to put the numbers together for next year's budget and then give guidance to committees and such, so we know how to best posture for 2024 and 2025 and what it looks like in the future. Thank you.
So, yes, Mr. Gatchell.
Clint, I understand the urgency of 2024, knowing that the work that the standing committees are going to be doing, potentially in very short order, is to address considerations in 2024. And
it's kind of the crux of the resolutions that we just passed. Is there any benefit to passing a resolution of this magnitude for 2024 with pending years to follow? And the reason I ask that is I can appreciate that knowing the gap 5 years from now may make some strategic difference in department heads and standing committees' minds. I just don't know that we'll be able to come up with anything tangible for 5 years from now on a figure that may or may not be accurate. And we may have more federal funding sometime between now and those 5 years. I mean, there's just so many variables. And I understand that we're driving towards a set of referendum questions, but I just wonder if that would be helpful, Clint, to kind of take 2024 autonomously. Potentially, but I don't know if that quite then gets at what Supervisor Murphy Lopez is visualizing for an extended referendum type of a question. Understood.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, go ahead.
I think the sense of that I'm getting from the referendum committee and after our first two meetings is there's not much interest in doing like a 1 year or a 2 year referendum and going back to the voters again so quickly. You know, I think we haven't decided on duration. It's pretty early on, but seeing the 5 years would really help us with crafting that referendum question. The other thing is, you know, I think a 5-year financial plan is a good idea. Of course, it's built on a lot of assumptions and estimates, and it's going to have to be reworked, you know, each year. But if we're comfortable with projecting out wage increases for 5 years, I think we should be comfortable with projecting out other things for 5 years. So we're going to want a balanced budget in each of those years. And so I think we just have to write down our ideas now. And then of course things will change. I mean, net new construction, the state allows us to make estimates about that as we come up with a referendum question. So of course all these are estimates. That's what a plan is. You know, it's projecting into the future, you know, thinking about what we're going to do. But if we're thinking we're going to have a $1 million gap in 25, you know, that sets us up for just kicking the can down the road again. And that's why I was supportive of this 5-year plan initially, is because it was and a referendum, because it's no longer kicking the can down the road. We're actually dealing with the issues right in the present. And I just think those committees, and departments, they need that honesty from us. And this resolution is not written in a clear and direct way currently. Thank you.
Okay. Well, we have a motion to postpone. So we'll take a roll call vote on that. Yes. Send it back to Clint. No. Leave it here.
Manning.
Give me the options one more time, Mr. Chair. What is it? What is a yes? What's a no?
Well, yes, I believe the language was, and correct me if I'm wrong, Supervisor Murphy Lopez, it was a motion to postpone until Section 7 is zeroed out. Is that correct? Okay, thumbs up. So a yes vote would be to postpone until that.
No.
Until the figures can be reworked to zero it out across the board. Yeah.
Gotcha.
No.
Carroll.
Yes.
Murphy Lopez.
Yes.
Brewer.
No.
No's 3, yeses 2.
Thank you.
Fails.
So the motion to postpone has failed. So we'll vote on the resolution as written.
Mr. Chair, may I
Yes.
make
Go ahead,
amendment
Mr. Gatto.
suggestion? I would make an amendment suggestion in all of these gray highlighted areas that reference a dollar amount. So for example, expense reduction of 350,000 entering into 2024. My amendment would be period after that, and striking and the same sustained reduction beyond. Period after entering into 2024, and then striking and the same sustained reduction beyond.
So it opens the door to more reduction, basically.
Correct. That's my intention.
I'll second that. Second by Manning, motion by Gatchel, second by Manning to get rid of basically the language sustained reduction beyond. Discussion. Mr. Carroll.
I think I see the reason to do that so that we get this moving, but we're still leaving that things hanging on this projection out 5 years that'll help make it easier to do a resolution. So is there some other way we can acknowledge or address the fact that without hanging this up, another way we can address the extension of time?
Okay. Anyone have any ideas to answer Steve's question?
Mr. Chair, although we're not explicitly stating it anywhere, it would be my intention that we would get this moving and on to county board and then take up our next item of business, zeroing out those years Mr. Murphy Lopez is referencing and creating the last 4 of our 5-year plan. But it's not explicitly said anywhere, to Steve's point.
Okay. So are you voting an entire, once we vote this yes or down, let's say it's a yes and it passes, then are you going to come up with another motion?
I would request, I don't know that I would come up with a motion. I would request for our next finance meeting that we take this exercise minus year 2024 and continue.
Okay. Does that sound doable, Clint?
You're going to be looking at essentially the worksheet and saying what comes off is how I visualize it, trying to get to a 0 on there. And again, we can work it from an administrative standpoint and try to hack those, I shouldn't say hack, try to amend and adjust those items to try to get it to 0. But it's going to, obviously it's going to call for reductions, even taking stripping down wages and all those other things. It really, we can't escape the inevitable fact that our revenues are stagnant and our expenditures are going to continue to go up, even just by inflationary factors. So it's going to be hard without really embracing that we have to get smaller.
Mr. Chair, I do understand that and I appreciate that. And I'm respecting the magnitude of that. I think in what Supervisor Murphy Lopez is asking for is that same exercise, but including 2024 before we take any action. So my idea was to get next year, next fiscal after this coming year, moving to at least signal a direction.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, I just want to say I'm in support of this amendment. I think it's a baby step toward where I'm trying to get. So just want to say that.
So you would support this motion? This amendment?
I do.
Oh, okay. All right, we have the amendment basically to take out the ongoing years. Let's deal with 24 and then give it back to the planners and come back with recommendations beyond. Okay, all those in favor of this amendment signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, now we have the amended resolution.
Mr. Chair, I have another amendment to propose.
Okay, go ahead.
So the date on here currently says June of 2023, but the referendum would likely happen next February or even probably more likely next April. So we're going to need to know from the committees much earlier, kind of similar to what we did with the other committees, ideally by October 31st of this year. I know for the fair, recycling and parks, we made an exception and we went to November 30th, and that would still work, but we have to give a 70-day notice to the clerk when we want to hold a referendum, and that would be late January. We're going to need a little time to work with the different ideas that the committees come up with so we can figure out what to propose to put on the referendum and what not to. So I'll make a motion to amend to strike the June 2023 date and replace it with October 31st, 2022.
Okay.
I'll second that.
All right, Carol seconds. Moving the date up, give some breathing room to the, well, actually not. It's whipping, applying the whip to the referendum committee. Because they have a finite time to do their job. All right. Can you vote on that, committee? All right. All those in favor of moving the timeline ahead or back from, what was it again? I can't think.
October 31st, 2022.
Yeah, this October. All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Okay. So we're gonna vote on the resolution. The main resolution. Okay, as amended.
Can we have a roll call on this, please?
Why not? Yes, we will. Yes means we pass it on as amended. No means, I'm not sure what that means. It means we don't like it, but go ahead. Carol, please call the roll.
Gotcha.
Yes.
Carol,
Yes.
Murphy Lopez,
No.
Brewer,
Yes.
Manning. Carries 4-1.
Okay. So we made a little headway. The motion carries.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Mr. Gutschall.
I need to leave and I believe I'm taking your quorum. So can I make a motion to postpone the rest of the items?
You may. I'm going to defer to Administrator Langrick. Is there anything in the remainder here that we need action on right now?
We have on here the reports that we had talked about. If there was discussion on individual items off that worksheet, I was hoping to get your folks' input on that at some point. As we just talked about, the report I did mention, capital improvement programs and borrowing. I don't have any additional information. We're working with Carol Worth and getting the authorization resolution put together. And if you had any specific guidance that you wanted to give to ad hoc before adjourning to your next date and time.
Mr. Chair, we have not moved 10A, E, F, and G forward because those were amended last time, but we didn't vote on that. So I would just make a motion that resolutions 10A, E, F, and G. So that's Fair, Recycling and Parks, Pine Valley, and Child Support, Joint Ambulance, and Simons.
Right. And as
I'll get-
amended, we want to move those forward as we amended them at the last meeting.
That's correct.
You're making a blanket motion to do that.
For the rest of them, yes.
So while Mr. Gotchell's still here, all those in favor of that, moving the
I'll need a, yeah.
resolutions to the board,
I'll second that.
and we have a second. Motion and a second. Signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, okay. That's done. So I think we can we can call for adjournment. Um, we would be adjourning normally to our next date would be, I believe,
September 6th. I do have financial hearings are next Wednesday, the 17th, sir, beginning in this room at 8 o'clock. Right now, it's in the guidance is put in there as a presentation to the administrator, finance and personnel committees. More than welcome to come, and if we do have a quorum, I would like to call a meeting into session to hear those. But again, I know it's a long day, and I didn't want to put us in a place where we're breaking quorum and then we can't do the hearings. So it will be recorded, will be accessible WebEx. If you'd want to adjourn to that place and time with a quorum, we can accommodate that.
That's Wednesday, next week, Wednesday, 8 o'clock, starting here. Basically, the departments will appear and state their case.
Mr. Chair, is there appetite to adjourn to an hour prior to county board on Tuesday?
I
There's not, that's okay. It's an option.
think there is, but, all right. So we will adjourn then to a date certain of 1 o'clock on September 6th. But also, we're adjourning next week, Wednesday. And you're invited to, and if we have a quorum on that day, then we will take up probably what you'd like to take up before the next meeting. All right, is that sufficiently vague as to be confusing? All right. Motion to adjourn. Manning. Seconded by Carol. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
We're adjourned.
Mr. Chair, I thank you and the committee for allowing me to participate.
Thank you, Mr. Seed.